Awesome. Hippies rule. All right. So here. Teaching is what excites me, you know, and I mean, I feel very honored to be doing what I do. You know, I feel like I knew this guy in California who was a musician, and he said once that he taught for the same reason that he played music, namely that in both instances it allowed him to interact with the world on a sort of higher plane of consciousness, you know, as opposed to sort of like, how are you today? Fine. Would you like paper? Would you like plastic? You know, sort of those superficial kind of interactions. I mean, I get to interact with people about the meaning of life. I mean, what could be more awesome than that, you know, and get paid for it, you know, enough to live? That's all I want, you know? I mean, that to me is an honor and a blessing, you know? And so I really, you know, that's my main passion. My other passions are, you know, obviously my family. I love to cook. I love the outdoors. I like to go camping, especially mountains. I'm from New Hampshire, so I like mountains. Yeah, those are a few of my favorite things. So it was years later when I was in California that I crossed paths with a Tibetan teacher of meditation. He was actually part of the last generation to be completely trained in Tibet. So he was sort of old school, you know, he'd done 2 or 3 3-year retreats, you know, out in the wilderness, and this guy was hardcore. And I was kind of hooked in by him. He had a kind of spiritual presence or a kind of spiritual power that's very hard to translate. So I immersed myself with him in Tibetan Buddhism, and it was a very transformative experience for me. But since that time, I've spent a lot of intellectual energy making the connections between Buddhism and Christianity, because, you know, I think it's impossible I can't pretend that I'm not an American. You know, I'm a white male from the United States, from New England. I was raised in an Episcopal church. So what does that mean? You know, and how do I integrate that past with my Buddhist perspective? And as I've since come to learn, there's a robust dialogue between Christians and Buddhists, and particularly in the Catholic Church, interestingly. And so I no longer think of the two as being separate. I almost think of it as being sort of like bilingual, you know? So sometimes I can speak Christian and sometimes I can speak Buddhist. When I'm practicing Buddhism, I'm in that language. And they're different. Buddhism, Christianity tends to be very, how do I want to say? Well, it's very theological, it's very philosophical, it wants big answers to big questions. Buddhism actually has a much narrower scope. Buddhism is very interested in cultivating inner peace, you know, cultivating your own mind. So you can do that and still, in terms of the big questions, maybe have Christian answers, maybe have Jewish answers, maybe have Islamic answers, so that it's like apples and oranges, if that makes any sense. So sometimes there's dialogue, sometimes it's like apples and oranges and you just eat a bunch of fruit. Jetsum pamma droma chenchen no gyakhen kunsel sandam yudrubzon. Jetsum pamma droma chenchen no gyakhen kunsel sandam yudrubzon. It's been more rough than smooth. You know, the most stable time of my life since the time I was in high school has been here at Lemoyne, right? I mean, getting here was bumpy. And a few years before I got to Lemoyne, right, the bumpiest time of my life, I think, was I've never done anything like this before in my life. One night, I packed up a bag of clothes, a box of books, and my computer, threw it in the back of my truck, and left. My brother in Boston had told me, he said, you know, you can stay with me for a while, you can work here. You know, I'm basically homeless, right? Driving across the United States in my pickup truck. It's winter. I have absolutely no money to my name. I'm living on the remains of a credit card. It has like $500 on it. One job in the country at that point in time. It was a one-year position. Probably about 150 applicants. This guy is telling me this on the phone while I'm driving. I said, when's the application due? Oh, next Monday. You know, there was this period of time where it was sort of like my life was in free fall and I didn't know how it was going to end. You know, I'm living in my brother's computer room in Boston. I'm like, you know, I don't know, how old am I at that point? I'm probably like 36 years old. I'm living in my brother's computer room. I don't have any money. I work for Trader Joe's, right? And, you know, that was bumpy. And what happened was I got that job.